Welcome to The Bold Blueprint, a podcast for modern educators who dare to think differently. Here we explore the intersection of education and leadership, diving into bold strategies, innovative teaching, and the mindset shifts that drive real impact. Whether you're in the classroom, leading a team, or shaping the future of education, this is your space to learn, grow, and lead with confidence. So, hey Barbie, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you. How are you going?
Well, I'm doing all right. This is our take 4, so
Yes.
I think we've got everything together, so that's exciting. But I have to tell you, with today's podcast, we've got an extra special guest, and I know we're both extremely thrilled and privileged to have Robyn Monro Miller with us today. And I think we're going to talk about all things play. Robyn, we've got a long-standing history together, and I know that you are the CEO of Play Australia, and you're the president of the International Play Association. What a wonderful space that you've been in. But I also wanted to learn a bit more that you have actually been awarded a really high honour over the recent years. You're also an AM, is that right?
That's correct. In the Australian honours system, Jamie received it for services to outside school hours care and to play. So I think, as I say, it's not just a sort of a celebration for me, but it's also one for the sector that we do have this.
I think that's so amazing. Robyn, one reason why I'm so excited for you to be here, obviously around what you are currently doing, but I don't know if you remember, but in around 2005, I was a freshie, brand new centre manager, coordinator, a really large service in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. And I know that you were the CEO of Network, the peak body for outside of school hours care in New South Wales. And I actually took part in your leadership retreat that you did over a period of, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. And it actually was the very first leadership course that I personally had undertaken as a 26-year-old, and those messages and learnings have always stuck with me. So before we get stuck in today, I really wanted to show my gratitude and say thank you for giving me that opportunity in those days.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. They were really wonderful times in my life, and I remember that group of young, fresh leaders coming through, and it was really exciting because I think it was one of the first leadership courses we ran in outside school hours care. So it was something that was new for us all, and as I say, it's just amazing to see where all those leaders, those young leaders, have gone to, including yourself and Barbie. And of course, just most recently, I returned to that. QCAN is now delivering leadership training, and I'm working with Kylie Branley, and the two of us are delivering leadership training. And once again, it's really inspiring to see so many great leaders in the sector and just reflecting and engaging in practice that not just improves things for children, but actually makes our work so much more rewarding and positive.
I think I did something similar, but in 2010, it was at the old children's court.
Yes.
The old premises. I remember going there as well, and I know it was leadership training. I can't remember if I had Robyn or not for it, but I definitely found it helped cement kind of this was the profession I wanted to stay in. Wasn't my little in-between as such, because I was especially going there, meeting the other professionals, meeting the team, and being like, oh, wow, okay, and learning so much more about what we can do in the profession, not just our experiences, but hearing from others. I loved it, I have to admit.
And I certainly think part of leadership is reflecting and becoming a better version of ourselves every time, and as I say, we're the best version of ourselves. We give the best to the children that we are working with.
I do remember seeing someone there that got a job I wanted, like they got the director role somewhere else, and then they were talking about it and how not amazing it sounded compared to I loved mine, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't get that job. So it also helped with that and appreciate a bit more of what I had in my own service at the time and how different things can be. But yeah,
that's really funny because that's one of the things that I've learned. The older I get, the more I think is when something doesn't work out the way we want, it's usually because there's something better coming. And in fact,
I totally agree.
is. I see so many people who have setbacks and are disappointed, and now I'm able to turn around and say something better is really coming. You just got to be prepared for it. And it's happened every time. It's like they now think I'm psychic, but actually it's just the law of attraction. It's just going to happen. And so I just, I'm not psychic. It's just really what I've just watched over the years. So Barbie, you're another example that I can add to that list of people who disappointed but find something better.
I was really disappointed. It was my own fault. I walked in and they asked me about the NQF and I didn't know what they were talking about. And from then on, I made it a goal of self-learning. It was my employer had never told me about it. And I'm like, just don't rely on your employer. Do your own self-learning as well. And then, it motivated that big change there. Oh, wait, we're sidetracked now.
No, but I love that you're talking about this, because it is this concept. And in previous episodes, we have talked about, that it doesn't matter if we've been given the title of leadership. In the eyes of children, what educators, even as a Certificate 3 trainee and entry level, in the eyes of a child, they are a leader of children. So it is also about this undercurrent of all of our episodes coming together about, leadership really does start with self, and professional development and self-growth starts with self. And yes, it's great that you have other people around to kind of say, hey, here's some learning, coaching, mentoring, but it is around that really hard discussion of internal self-discovery. And I know, Robyn, you emulate that. And I think you definitely have two massive fans today. And I know we were so nervous to re-engage with you, but for you to be here today. And I guess for the listeners, I'd love for you to be able to share what the Play Association is currently doing, any kind of initiatives that are underway. And then I'd love to also talk a little bit about the importance of what play might look like, especially in this modern society where structured learning seems to, I feel like we've kind of gone backwards a little bit in that, and that re-education space that, children learning through this idea of what play might be. So I'd love to hear a bit more about what you're doing in the great work.
Okay, great. Well, Play Australia is actually the peak advocacy body for play in Australia. We've got as our mission to build healthy communities through the power of play, and we're a not-for-profit organisation that was established back in 1913, and it was established by a group of concerned individuals like the Alfred Deacon's wife, a Prime Minister, his wife Patty, and a doctor, a new all range of people who really decided that play of children in sort of playing in the street, they didn't have access to playgrounds. So it was an equity issue that sort of drove a group of people to take action and social justice for children who back in 1913 understood how powerful play was for children's development. So we've just gone, as they developed from there. I took over the role after our long-term executive officer retired in 2023, and I'm now working on sort of that big, hairy, audacious goal of getting ourselves a national agenda for play in Australia. And so that's really our big target focus for Play Australia. But we're also developing the playwork sector. So we've brought experts from Wales who are leaders in the field of playwork, and we've got a cross-sectoral program running that incorporates occupational therapists, out-of-school hours educators, early childhood teachers, playground designers in studying playwork. And we've got, so we'll be celebrating this coming month 100 people will have qualified in the last sort of 12 months. And then we also got the Asia Pacific Conference happening, which is a landmark conference. We haven't had an Asia Pacific Play Conference in Australia, and it's actually a high-level conference driving policy and bringing people together to really talk about policy outcomes across design and urban planning, across education and the arts, and across health and well-being. So it's three streams, and it's really important to us that people see play not just as belonging to one particular part of the sector, but to actually embed it across everything that we do with our children, because we know play is such a biological necessity. The more we hear about neuroscience, the more we learn about development. We cannot see play as just something, an add-on that we do occasionally. It's got to be something that's embedded in children's daily lives, and that's my passion. And it's been a passion for a long time now, but it's wonderful to be working with Play Australia to actually, in this role, to be able to actually see it through.
So I guess at the moment I'm actually recording this. It's amazing we're in modern day technology. I'm actually in Singapore, and the education system is very different in Singapore. Very academic, rote learning, sitting down, getting knowledge, remember that, go through a test kind of approach, and it's definitely very, very different. And this conversation of play that I've actually started talking to people over here about, people go a little bit blary eyed and go, why is that even important? How is that going to help people become academic later in life? Can you talk to us in maybe some simple terms about why is play important? Like, why should we focus on this approach?
Okay, well, if we think about what we know about play, humans are not the only only things that play. All animals with complex social systems and even less complex social systems play. So just looking at that fact alone tells us play isn't something, there's something going on with play that's deep in the evolution of a species, that all these young are playing. And so that's the first thing we know. So play seems to be common across a whole range of species. Therefore, there's something integral to our development linked to play. And in fact, we are the only species that actively deprives our children of play. So, and we're also the species that has rising anxiety levels, depression rates, ACL injuries, you name it, it goes on. But what we do know now from the study of the brain is the fact that, in fact, it's occurring deep. What sort of creates play is deep within our brains, in the center of our brains, and we know that the amygdala, which is our fight or flight response in our brain, is linked to play activity. And we also know that we have a hypothalamus in our brain that's linked to play activity. All of these things, when children play, they actually create their brain. They're developing their neural circuits in their brain. They're getting their brain to be active. Now, before we do any physical activity, we need to have an active brain. And then, of course, our brain communicates with the rest of our body. So from that perspective, this play drive is deep within our brains. And in fact, it's considered to be one of the essential parts of that we don't have any control over. Our play drive just emerges. And there's a lot of great research that I could talk for hours on this because I'm so passionate about it. But it's something that we cannot keep ignoring because we are seeing the results. What we do know is that just half an hour of active play, within an hour of that active play happening, a third of the neurons in the brain, which are the nerve cells, are actually changed and transfigured and moved and connected. So we cannot underestimate. We talk about physical activity, but we need this physically active play that actually helps drive that development, that brain development. And of course, it's all linked in as well with our sensory pathways, so that through play we develop our sensory pathways. So making sure our environments are really rich. And looking at all of the different ways children can engage with their environments through play is another part of just developing brains.
Yeah, I was even reflecting on myself as an adult because I know adults need play too. It's just we all do it differently or go to different means. I'm, I guess, lucky in the sense I've got a 5-year-old now and a 3-year-old who love Lego. I know it's not active play, but oh my gosh, the amount of play I find I'm doing lately with Lego. And
What are
then
you making out of Lego pieces?
So this is where play is obviously what the kids are doing with our adult brains. We want to make what the box says. Children don't want to make what the box says to make. So I have to admit, I'm trying to make what the box says. And then the 3-year-old's like, no, I want that piece. And you have to be like, it's okay. It's their form of play. That's just my interpretation. Can't constrict it. But the amygdala, the fight or flight, like how relaxed I feel after that. It's just such a difference instead of doing something else like housework or something like that isn't play. And genuinely, I think your breath changes are probably all links to the nervous system. And when you're playing, whether it's Lego, I know it's not active, but even the physical you can definitely see the breath will change a lot, and then that just helps reset everything. And I have to admit, how I approach my afternoon, because I've been trying to do Lego play, and a 3 and a 5-year-old, trying to get them on a bed to home routine is a long journey. Just having that Lego play, I find, makes a big difference to how the rest of the journey goes. But you're talking about the neurons,
Yeah.
and it is huge difference in how they seem.
Yeah, well, the interesting part about that is what you're feeling when you're feeling all those good feelings. They're actually chemical messengers that are being sent out. So, neurotransmitters are the chemical messengers, and it's neurotransmitters that are released during play. So, things like serotonin and
Yeah.
dopamine are all released, just the same as adrenaline is released, which, is our, gives us a bit of that energy. But there's also other neurotransmitters that are released that help us with our learning and our memory. They're all very long names. I could go through them, but as I say, there's every one of those chemical messengers has a role to play in the development of our brain and our bodies, and they are being released when we are playing. And that is why, particularly the dopamine, that's why you feel so good after play, or you feel relaxed. And likewise, when we release cortisol, which is basically a stress hormone, a stress chemical messenger that says in stress, we have children who come in from school who may be really stressed because they've had a stressful day. Play is what actually dilutes that stress in the brain. You can't, if the frontal lobe of your brain is filled with the cortisol, you can't concentrate. You feel fuzzy, you feel funny. We can actually create environments where, when children play, the dopamine's released and sort of allows that cortisol to dissolve away and replaces it with dopamine. And so they're able to think clearer, they're able to be sort of more relaxed, and they're able to sort of learn again. If we cannot learn with a stressed brain, play in itself creates those opportunities, all those chemical reactions to help us to learn.
It
Yeah,
makes
wow.
me think too. So whether it's early childhood education, again, I've got a child in or early learning. Sometimes as a parent, you've got to be somewhere at a certain time. You're pretty rushing them in the morning. So by the time they get to their setting, whether before school care or early learning, that child may be arriving already pretty hyped
Yeah,
up.
makes sense.
So
Yeah.
on an educator perspective, like, it's good for educators to probably be mindful. Yes, they may have just arrived. You've got the kids who have just actually rolled physically out of bed, or you've got the others who have a mum like me who's like, come on, we got to go, we got to do this. Why are you doing that? Don't hit your brother for the last hour, who come in with probably their stresses a bit higher, because, yeah, that's just what it's like some mornings.
And play prepares children for the environments for learning. So the children who come to before school care, if it's a relaxed environment where children can play and relax and explore their own sort of what they're wanting to do with their different activities, then you've got an environment where they are ready to learn. They go into the classroom ready to learn because their brain is ready for learning. It's not stressed. And so
Yeah.
we've got a really important role to play in our before school care programs around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, I mean, I've got my personal perspectives around the way some educators are learning through some RTOs with a Certificate 3 and a diploma. And I've seen some of the course material, and, people are learning around case studies, how to write learning stories, how to document, how to do all these things. But I can't be confident that every single RTO is educating educators around how to give a program and give an enriching experience for play. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm curious, based on your research and what you know to be true with play, what kind of advice could you give educators about creating an environment that fosters this idea of play?
Well, the very important principle to first remember about play is that as adults, we do not create play, we create conditions for play to occur. And
Oh,
that's really important. We are not creating the play. Whatever happens in that play environment is not our role to create. It's our role is to create conditions. So when we think about conditions for play, we need to think about do children feel a sense of ownership in that space? So can they come in and access materials and equipment? Can they see them at eye level? Can they actually sort of choose what they want to play and move it in and out? As outdoors, indoors. What are the sort of the structures we are putting around it that restrict play? It doesn't mean we don't have structure, because obviously, there are certain rules, but children need to be well acquainted to what those rules are, and then we allow the flexibility to develop within it. The other thing that creates sort of environments for play, and I say this is a couple of hours workshop that I was only delivering one recently to a group of out of school hours services, but I say looking at how we respond to the senses. What is it in our environments? Do our environments look appealing to the eye? So that children can see potential. Are there a range of different resources they can access freely and use, and not necessarily with set ideas, the idea of that old box or the old sheets and the old cardboard, things like that children can pull away range, and the other elements around being able to sort of create environments where they can explore a little bit more. When we think about the smells and in our environment, that I like to think of sensory pathways when I think of creating conditions for play. I like to think about how our environments appeal to each side of the senses. And certainly, do we have opportunities for children to actually be outside, to run, to swing, to roll, and the idea that we often have children using their hands and different textures, but do we allow children at times to have their shoes off? Can they have the texture of their sort of grass underneath their feet? So I think it's all about, what's the condition that we're creating that allows children to see the environments that we provide as an invitation, not a restriction to play.
It's interesting. You're actually bringing a lot of memory back to my own childhood, and I know in previous episodes I did share a little bit about the not so great side of my childhood, but some of the positive aspects was a sense of freedom and climbing trees and swinging upside down and having a sense of adventure. And I just got this image of children with shoes off and having time. I guess that's the other aspect, right? To be able to have those social constructs and togetherness and be able to see where things go and using everyday material. I know sometimes I see in early childhood centres specifically, there's now developers are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars around these designs of services with light fixtures and little intricacies where they've got designers and everything. And I sometimes think to myself, like, do children really care about that stuff? Do they really care about the high-end resource material that might be in a corner or has a one-size-fits-all approach rather than a multi-dimensional kind of perspective that a child, to your point, Barbie, with Lego may not see that specific thing that's on a box, but actually is there multiple ways of being able to use brain and developing and problem solving?
And one of the interesting things, the Royal Children's Hospital did a poll a couple of years ago, and it actually surveyed parents on these sorts of ideas of play. And one of the things, 95% of those parents, over about 3,000 parents were surveyed, 95% of those parents believed in the importance of play. But when you drill down in some more of their answers, over a third of parents thought they had to negotiate the space, where, like, you had to negotiate or mediate with children they're playing if there was conflict. A third of them thought they needed to supervise, and another, like, within that third was also a third of parents saying that they thought they needed to provide the play opportunities. And so I think as adults, even those of us, with our children, sometimes don't understand or appreciate that play has to be navigated and managed by children directly. We can be there as supportive adults, but allowing them to negotiate their conflict, allowing them to choose what they're playing, allowing them to choose how the materials are used. And that's one of those really interesting things that we all support play, but do we get it right? And I think we've still got a lot of learning to do, because that idea, Jamie, you had of, the freedom that you remember of exploring and bare feet and things like that. I mean, there was no adult there mediating.
There wasn't.
No.
And everyone survived.
Sorry, Robyn.
Yeah, go on. No, go on.
I was always a fan of shoes off. I never made kids wear it, except for, we even had a site that, because a lot of schools, I don't know if this is everywhere, but especially where I am in Sydney, are built on old tips, especially the ovals. Our school was built on a glass tip, glass and crockery. I still let kids not wear shoes. So we risk assessed. We did everything we could. We had Safe Work New South Wales come out, do whatever they could, and we still didn't make them wear shoes. But I also never understood why people make them wear shoes. Like, what does everyone do when they get home? Usually everyone changes their clothes as adults, put on the comfy pants and shoes. but after school we want kids to stay in their school uniform and their shoes and not relax but have a home-like environment. So for me, I just never understood when people say they make kids wear it, and then if they use safety, but I'm still like, but why? Like,
But
it,
yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Barbie. But to be completely honest, recently there has been some negative press. There was a recent Four Corners article around safety in services, and I guess when there is that negative press around, and also around some educators not doing some really thoughtful things, which we have discussed as
mm,
well. And I guess, Robyn, what I'd love to kind of explore in this moment in this podcast timing is when the media is looking at ideas around safety of children and making sure organizations are keeping children safe, if we're talking about these concepts of open-ended, open learning, play-based spaces, there also could potentially be an
Mm,
opportunity of children being hurt.
yes, yeah.
What advice do you might have for our listeners around that?
I think it's like I say, I think it's important that we keep in mind that we are in services, okay? And yeah, there, what can happen when a parent is in charge of a child is very different to what the expectations are. So I think you need to look at it from a perspective of, well, what are the benefits in our that these activities provide, and also what are the risks, and how we sort of moderate. And there are some really good assessments you can do, benefit risk assessments. So you need to have clearly documented reasons for what you're doing and why.
Yeah.
And that is always gives you good standing in the event of any issue or claim. But also you need to sort of weigh up, are our children at that level where they can progress to that stage yet? Because some, say, depending on your environments, you may not be able to wear bare feet. Okay. But you may at times be able to plan an excursion where there's a patch of green grass. And I always remember being in a service where we had taken children just to the park, and it was by bus, but they were inner city kids, not been around any parks really. And what I had mistakenly forgotten, as the buses pulled up, the doors open, and I'm standing there to do hello, welcome, and the children just took off because we pulled up at a space, a large expanse where you could run forever on green grass in Centennial Parklands in
Oh
Sydney,
yeah. Yeah.
and they took off and ran. Okay, and so obviously, if we can find spaces where children can do that sort of thing, using it as part of an excursion. Sometimes our excursions can be much simpler. We can, if we haven't got a great space to go barefoot in our services, maybe we can check out a space where there's a green park with thick grass and it's looking great, where there's space to run and roll and do those sorts of things. We need to just balance it. We are working in a really difficult situation of that juggling between risk and benefit, and also bringing parents along with us on the ride. And it's not an easy job. In fact, what will be happening in the next couple of weeks, we're releasing on June the 24th, just before our Asia Pacific conference, risk statement, a national position statement on risky play that's been put together by academics and educators and some paediatricians, and consulted on to put together a statement about the importance of risky play. So we've really got to bring our parents along with us on that journey. And then, of course, the media comes with us. But if those issues arise, having those benefit risk assessments, having your procedures in place, and don't take risks if you don't feel comfortable with them.
yeah.
Mm.
That's an
I,
important thing. Don't assume just because okay, Robyn said risk is important for children, then go and do it. No, that isn't what I'm saying. Risk is important for children, but we need to look at how we can apply that in our own practice. That's ensuring that we meet our requirements as educators and the expectations of the regulation of regulators, schools, and the community. So I say it's a juggling act, and it's hard on a podcast to go into all of this detail, but I just want you to know that, like I say, if we can just keep that in mind, we're on a learning curve. We're learning and we're working through things now, and we're going to come across things like bad press at times, but we'll work through it. And obviously, the instances in the press that have been very bad have been obvious acts of neglect.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're proposing in regards to how we manage play are not designed to neglect. They're not neglect. They're actually encouraging development. And so just being very clear how we would present that if there was ever an accident.
And you said something too of not doing what you're not comfortable with.
Mm.
I think your service, whether an independent or a larger provider, needs to be a bit more mindful of where each educator, whether 10, 20 years experience or new, and what they're comfortable with. Like we had tree climbing, risk assessed, everything, and we had a bunch of educators that didn't feel comfortable being the ones supervising that activity. We never forced them to do it, no matter what. They did
Right.
learn and kind of ask questions from others. It's just purely perhaps their background. They've never done it. I have to admit, it was often the ones studying teaching that were more adverse. The ones studying law were like, "Go for it," and it was just working. Like we didn't force anyone. They actually genuinely watched others do it, learn from it. They might point out things we actually hadn't seen, and and again, in an organisation, just being mindful that just because it's an activity you do, especially risk-based, doesn't mean that educator supervising feels comfortable. Because I think people forget, because we were also comfortable with it. It was just, at least we had a culture where people could actually say something instead of nervously watching the tree that the kids were in and things like that.
That's so important.
And I think that's so important too. And I think, you know what this conversation brings me to? I don't know if you know this. Do you know how old I was when I started driving?
Really young.
No, you were in your 30s, weren't you? No.
Oh.
Yeah. Good work. Yeah, Robyn, I love that. I was 32. And that's quite old to be a driver. But when I started driving, I was so nervous. I still am a bit of a nervous driver, but compared to a 16-year-old who had done it for a long period of time, people had the assumption, being 32, I would be a confident driver. And I always lived inner city Sydney, so I never needed to drive. I just got public transport everywhere. And I think this conversation is also about knowing where people are at in their journey. And my biggest advice, and I'm sure you might both agree, is, when we're thinking about risk benefit play, or, having these experiences, we start small. You don't have to go and have a fire pit and everyone having that experience, which I personally have seen, and it's worked really well. But no service starts at a fire pit experience, and I'm not at all saying that every centre should have a fire pit and that experience. But I guess that's probably to an extreme, having a fire space. But I normally suggest to educators, start small. You can do some tinkering. You can get everyday material such as cardboard boxes, putting spaces into areas. Because I'm more focused in the long day care setting at the moment, I've worked in the outside of school hours care spaces, but allowing children to have those experiences, not just for half an hour to an hour, but actually even exploring it over weeks and seeing where children can actually have. And I remember a service that I used to manage in Balmain. We used to have a really big construction area where there would be boxes and blocks and different aspects. And the children were so amazing. They self-regulated this. They used to build these elaborate castles and things that they just had from an inquiry-based learning perspective. And what they used to do when morning tea and lunch would occur is that they actually would, and this was 3 to 5 year olds, they would write their name or their image or what their name might be, and they would put it on there, and they would have ownership that that was their space. And all of the other children knew, if my name was there, that is my experience, and that wasn't to be packed away. And the educators respected that as well. So I think there's different things we can do. And I know that some environments don't have the luxury of having a big space of construction that could stay for a long period of time, because maybe beds or something else might need to be in that space. But it is thinking about environments where children can go back and revisit what they have previously done. Quite often I see in services around the country where there's this idea of set up, pack away, set up, pack away, and there's blocks of time for 15, 20-minute, 30-minute intervals where we go structured through the day. And I'm guessing, Robyn and Barbie, I'm not too sure if you agree with what I'm suggesting, but I do think sometimes we do have to think about the rhythm of the day for children.
Yeah. And the other thing that I was going to say is, we cannot underestimate the environment being and the interactions and the playfulness. I would say, an hour of play is negated if you have a very structured and people are not playful and there's stress. Children can't play in those environments. As staff members, we need to have a playful approach, a light-hearted, a joy. We need to be able to spark joy in children, and we need to have that joy ourselves. We need to be really conscious of the fact that in an environment there can be nonsense, there can be silliness, and children learn the difference between when it's time to be silly, when it's time to be serious, and they can actually make those moments very playful. Just even how you greet children, and the way you do roles, the way you serve afternoon tea, and children being able to see you as a playful, engaged person, because that will allow and create conditions for play. And we sometimes, I say, if we're all sticklers, if we're all angry and we've got energy that's the really negative energy, people are not. No one's going to feel comfortable to play in that environment. We don't feel
Totally.
comfortable to play. If that's your approach, I say, please, I know there's a staff shortage, but get out of the sector.
Yeah.
Because children need to be filled with people who are inspiring and sparking joy. It's not like you have to maintain it, 24/7, but it's really important for this energy, this positive, playful energy to be there, and staff to be seen as positive and playful. Even if you can't get all of the really right, all the sort of the playful activities you want to get in, because of your restrictions, if you can be in an environment where you're playful and there's a sense of nonsense and fun, you will be achieving very similar results, according to your circumstances.
I have to admit, so when you said I write hand notes, but I've circled the word energy, not that you can see on here, but you said to otherwise get out of the industry, but I also see it as the other side of, if children's experiences are from educators that perhaps don't seem like they want to be there, that more not inspiring energy, it also reflects on them that this probably isn't a career for them. If they don't have the fondest memories of educators around them, it may lead them to actually never consider it as a career for them in the future, which also affects the future generation of who's going to be working in the space. I often come across, because I see a lot of leaders that might be in, especially in USH, because everyone kind of finishes schools and is like, what's outside school hours care? I know my career advisor said do teaching or early learning. They fall into it, and then there's a lot that fall into it because they have good experiences. They remember going as a child. That help keep them in there. But yeah, just everything is affecting the children right there and then, but also then the future generation, because they're all going to be the ones working in the profession come 20 years time, and just such a big difference from there. And I know, Jamie, you started about the structure, but I did write something Robyn said earlier. I'm really bad at verbatim, and I also write shorthand. I wrote structure plus freedom within. I think you mentioned it, and this is my mum hat I'm taking my notes for, actually, with my mum hat on, because I have to admit I struggle on the mum side. Educator, I'm free as. On the mum side, oh my gosh. And it's having that structure. Structure is important, but then having freedom within that structure and how things can look. And I know I forget that as a mum. You get quite prescriptive because you often feel like on time deadlines. As an educator, I never felt like that. Because it wasn't like on me for their homework to be completed, or I felt like as an educator and director, it was on me for them to have a enjoyable experience. And that was so much easier to work with on a structure. Even when it came to packing up and everything like that, it felt so much more in flow than a different environment. But yeah, something as simple as structure and freedom within, I think I need to stick on my wall at home above the play area.
Yeah, but I totally agree, because, if you think about long daycare and early childhood spaces, services are usually open from, say, 7 to 6:30. There's usually people who are working an 8-hour day, and in the outside of school hours care service, and before school, children need to go to school and the school finishes. So there is a typical routine that happens in a day, and children thrive through structure. We know predictability, and having structure is supportive for children's development as well. But I do believe sometimes we do get really rigid. It's 10 o'clock, all right, we've got to go quick. And then and it is about seeing freedom within that structure as well. And that's why I typically refer to not a daily routine, but actually a rhythm of the day.
I love that term. I think that's great.
Yeah, I just think rhythm is better.
Playing music for transitions. When you know something, when you know there's going to be a transition, having some music that plays. So children have got 5 or 10 minutes to actually start the packing up or understand that it's happening. It just means that they're not always hearing your voice saying, time to pack up or time to do this, time to do that. There's music playing and they suddenly do, the music's here, let's go. We start to move.
So, Robyn, I've got a question now for you. Educators, I find, wonderful learning around working with another team member, typically, not always, but typically, and building relationships. I'd like to believe our educators across the sector generally are, building great relationships with children, broad stroke statement. But sometimes I find talking and advocating for this idea of play with parents who might have a preconceived notion around what play might be and traditional learning in their mindset of what that might be in inverted commas. What kind of advice might you have for educators who might struggle a little bit about talking to parents, about talking about that play actually helps brain development and helps to support neuroconnections and actually helps to foster a love of lifelong learning?
I would certainly say you drip feed, okay, just a bit at a time, and you'll that's through putting interesting facts in your newsletters, ensuring that they've got access to fact sheets on this, and Play Australia can support services with that. And we've got a new lot of fact sheets and things coming out in time for the International Day of Play. But yeah, starting to drip feed those sort of experiences in, even reminding or asking adults to share their play memories, and you might do a group activity where you've got the children sharing their favourite play memories if you've got a place to display it, and then you ask them to go and ask their parents about their favourite play memories and getting their parents to write it down or share it and put it onto the play memories board. So you could actually start to get parents involved in thinking about their own experiences as children, bearing in mind that if they were kids of the 80s and 90s, they may not have had as richer play experiences as their grandparents. I was a kid of the 70s. I've got to tell you, it was wild and woolly, but it was definitely, very playful in the purest sense. So, you might even want to ask them to ask their grandparents as well, their grandparents and parents, to find out, to put their play memories on your play memories board. So you can do things like that actually start to get the conversation about play going. And obviously, as I say, drip feed the facts, little bits and pieces of pockets of information. Play Australia delivers to a range of people around the importance of play, and including, like, we've had a number of, we deliver to play space in council, maintenance guys, you name it, about the importance of play. And whilst they're there to do a maintenance course and they're hearing this play space, the one thing, all of them come up to me at the end of the session or in their evaluations and say, I want to know more about the brain. I really find that's really interesting, because as parents, they immediately think, wow, people just don't know this stuff. And once they know it, you've got converts. Once people know what's happening in the brain, once people know that if a child doesn't have upper body strength through climbing and playing, they can't sit still in class, so they can't participate properly or concentrate. If they can't actually participate and concentrate and get lost in a game so that they don't even hear you, that's them improving their concentration. That's them being able to translate that into life. So it's these things, once they know about it, you don't have to resell again. It's about getting that information to them in the first place. And let's start with where they're at. And often it's with their own memories. And some of those memories may not be, as enriching as we would like. But then we start to talk to them about the brain. We start to talk to them about the different ways this has an impact on their child in their future and also in the classroom. Because the one thing most parents are concerned about is the classroom. When really, if they get it right outside the classrooms are guaranteed success for them.
Yeah, and I think on the parent side too, especially with the kindy kid and hearing other kindy parents who are so unsure, like so many are so unsure of doing something wrong, like even just what you put in their school lunchbox to these days, let alone their play. There's just so much to the million groups you've got to be in, whether it's WhatsApp, I was about to say Snapchat, wrong one. I'm obviously not on platforms. Emails, the newsletters. Like, I had to drive to the school and drop off 3 different things the other day because I'd forgot and missed them all in the different newsletters. But there's so many different things that then when it comes to play, it's almost like they get a bit nervous too in that sense. I never thought that before having kids, but I have to admit, now I see that. And I know with talking to parents, I was at one service for 10 years, so same community and everything, and just seeing the change of families. Got there with families quite relaxed, to then we had a change in, I think, principal and leadership team and families that got quite more risk averse, to then trying to leeway them back to the more relaxed setting, because that was kind of the culture of our service and the environment we had. I remember, probably you may not remember, I even I think emailed Robyn at the time going, do you do talks for parents? Because when you were saying, what do you do? I was like, they just weren't listening to me no matter what I said, because they were just used to us and what we did, and they were having issues with it. And I'm like, I think I needed an external perspective at the time. We
Sometimes
never we never got to go through with it, but we did have to kind of drip feed and do baby steps and slowly turn it over and over. One of our team actually joined the P&C and spoke and did more there, and then so the P&C got more kind of knowledge on it, and then that drip feeds down to other parents, to other people in the school, and just like how that kind of conversation, even though it was already there to start with, kind of disappeared to then bringing it back in. Like, it can happen, especially if it's what the children needs are as well, not what we wanted, just because we liked the risk. Doesn't mean they do, but it was what those children wanted and needed in that time.
Yeah. And look, can I just draw, knowing what we know about the brain, the parents we're dealing with are possibly in high stress situations. Now, what happens in a high stress situation, just as we have stressed children, their frontal lobe, their thinking part of their brain, the executive functioning part of their brain where their problem solving is flooded with cortisol and stress. And what happens is you shut down, you minimize, you try, you start to function in the fight or flight mode at the back of your brain. And so there's only so much you can take on. And so what you start to do as you're getting into that stressful environment is control. You've got to control things.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's keeping you. And so when you're dealing with parents, bear in mind they are in a situation of high stress. And some will be of less stress, but there's a majority of parents with young children are in a stressful situation. They're dealing with their children, their workplaces, their mortgages, you name it, their parents, you name it. Understanding this is really important to say, okay, what can we do to be more playful in our interactions with parents? What can we do when they come into us to help them release some dopamine into their
I love
brain?
that. It's so true.
We need to get parents with dopamine in their brain so they start to think, they start to problem solve, and they start to feel better. And we don't necessarily help that if they arrive and we say, got to talk to you about your child. Okay. And so there's things like that we need to start looking at. How are we making it nice for parents? And I use the word nice is in how do we make our parents appreciate and see it as a warm, welcoming place, a playful place where there's some opportunity. And so letting them have that time, even if it's some time to play themselves, inviting them to play, or freeing up some time so they can come and play. Really important. Just keep that in mind. We're not just managing children, we are actually managing, parent stress loads, and a child is whether people like to hear this concept or not, I find a child is an extension of their parent in many ways. They pick up, and we know from our limbic systems, the way our bodies communicate, we pick up our energy from each other, we thrive off each other. So a child with a stressed parent will be often a stressed child. They're picking up that energy. We pick it up from our co-workers, that energy. And so we need to see this as part of an ecosystem, a play ecosystem in our out of school hours services, and we're supporting everybody to be more playful, to be more joyful, and to actually find joy in the everyday and the playful moments that can exist in the environments we create.
Wow, gosh, Robyn, I'm so inspired right now. I'm like, yeah, we can do this.
We can do it. Yes.
We can do it. So I guess my question is what is one thing that an educator, if they were inspired by today and they're like, I'm going to do all this, what do you think the one thing that an educator might want to kind of start with?
Oh, the pressure.
I know.
Where would they start?
Well,
I think I would like you to, this afternoon or at some stage in this week, I'd like you to stop and look around. Stop. I mean, because we can be so busy functioning, keeping the routines going, making sure everyone's happy, that we haven't stopped and actually watched. I want you to look, say, make sure you've got the staff covering you, but I want you to sit down somewhere and just observe. who's playing, how are they interacting, what's happening, really looking at the interactions, looking at the way the staff interact. Are the staff supporting that play, or are they stopping play? Are they barriers to play? Just watching all the different interactions and start to think about, take that time to think and reflect on what you're seeing, because what is the current place where your environment is at? And then what are you going to do from there? That's like an action plan. But I think the first thing is we have to look at our environments. I'd also encourage you to walk into your environment on your knees. Because I'd like you to see what your environment looks like at that level, because the environment in your service isn't at 5'6", 5'7", or 6'1". The environment in your service is usually down in the 4 feet area, because that's what children are seeing and experiencing. So that's another place to have a look at the environment and playfulness and access.
So it's about stopping, pausing, and just maybe sitting and watching what's occurring, and getting down to the eyes of the level of a child and seeing what they see.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's very tangible. I think that's something that all educators can do. That's free. It doesn't cost
Don't all
money.
do it at once. Don't all do it
Don't
at
all do it at once.
once.
Robyn and Barbie, I don't know, last thing that I'd like to just raise, and everything you're also bringing up, I don't know if you remember, around, I think it was 2009, there was a documentary that I actually watched, that you showed me, Robyn. It was called The Lost Adventures of Childhood.
Yes.
Do you remember that? And
Yes, I
a
do.
lot of the narrative that we're talking about today, it's now on YouTube. It goes for about 47 minutes, but it does talk about this idea of when you talked about what childhood used to look like generationally, in the 70s, 60s, and prior, and what this idea of where children's identity and play and all those constrictions that are in today's society, and what that difference might look like. That's a little thing that I took a lot of inspiration from, in 2009.
Yeah. And Play Australia would also like to help your viewers out, and we've got a special offer on our online training for the introduction to the playwork principles. And so we've got a special offer. We'll give you the code that you can send out to people, or they can access, to be able to have a discount code to get into that particular introduction to playwork principles. It gives you an idea of what playwork actually is, and it's specifically designed and got people speaking to you about the importance of playwork and how it manifests itself in your service. If you understand the playwork principles, which are internationally recognised principles for play and playwork, it will help you and your team to actually better identify how you can create conditions for play in your service.
Well, that was a great plug. And I have to tell you personally, at Early Learning Management, we have someone within our team going and becoming a play, with you in the journey. And she has been so thrilled and excited to be on this journey with you and play. Sorry, I'm getting the name wrong.
Play Australia.
Play Australia. I was about to say Play
Easy one.
Association. Sorry, Play Australia. And I tell you, and she's only just done the introduction webinars. I
I
mean,
know she hasn't got to the good bits yet.
she hasn't even got to
Don't
the
tell
good
them
bit.
that, but
No, and so we're having daily conversations. She's heading down to Melbourne, I believe, next week, and I can hand on heart, advocate and support the initiatives that you're doing. And this has been such a great conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, as I say, I'm lovely talking to you both. And as I say, I'm very optimistic for play and for the outside school hours care sector. I mean, as I say, we've always been champions and leaders in practice, despite what many people sometimes think that we were the Cinderella. We were definitely moving ahead at a much faster rate. And I think, in across children's services, whether you're in early childhood or in middle childhood services, the work that's being done is phenomenal. And when we get play embedded across all of those services, which is happening with our frameworks, we will actually be in a really great position to see the next generation flourish.
Well, I think just having playworker recognised in the update of My Time Our Place, version, I feel like I'm saying it all wrong, version 2.0, I think it's a big step in the right direction as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, Barbie, but actually when My Time Our Place version 1, I was part of the advocacy committee with Robyn. So I was at the table when there was the consultation perspective. It was quite a special moment. I felt quite privileged to be part of that.
It was a great, traveling around doing those consultations were great. And it was interesting because we had to fight really hard to get play even mentioned in that document.
That's right.
And so, as say, but like everything, things evolve. And so, once again, as the playwork sector has evolved, we're in a better position. And the next version, we were able to get more of it in. But play has always been fundamental to what happens in children's services. It just hadn't been recognised. And that's the important part. It's about now recognising that it wasn't just an optional extra we do for children. It was a biological necessity. And it sits alongside quality caregiving, good nutrition, and adequate sleep as fundamental to children's development.
Hey, Barbie, should we ask the question as we're wrapping up the podcast?
Yeah.
Go on, you do it this time.
No, I'm always back. Hey, Robyn, if you ever have a phone call me or podcast, I can't end things. I'm just like, sorry. So, no,
I'm quite nervous about this question now.
No. It's just a me thing. It's not an alcohol question. It's nothing to do. We tried to put on a question that has nothing to do with usually whatever we talked about or our work, but something more from our own world. And it was more. Was it the first or the last? What was the first live gig? Or if you don't into live music or performance or anything like that, it could be on, I was about to say Broadway, but I'm in the wrong country, but you know what I mean. Anything like that. What was the live gig performance you had seen?
Okay, great. That would, the live gig that wasn't supervised by parents, there was ABBA back in the 1970s with parents, but the big live gig, which I'd call a proper gig, was Crowded House, somewhere in George Street. When they were first, little known, that was there. And I must say, when was that? Probably, I'm just trying to think, late 80s, mid 80s probably, Crowded House.
And who did you go with? It's a pretty great show. Did you go by yourself or were you with people?
Oh, with friends, with friends. I think it was friends from uni that we all went with, yeah.
Yeah. There was nothing more liberating that first show to go and see, I think. And that's a great live band.
Although this shows Robyn and her play mindset. You're the only person that said it. You're like, oh, with parents or without parents? That never even crossed my mind. Because I think the first band I can't remember who I said. I saw The Offspring. And I'm like, hang on, there was a parent there. I didn't even think that through. But that's a real good context. And then shows where Robyn's genuinely in the play all the time and thinking of the adults around.
The environment that I'm creating, But I must say the best live gig I've seen was Michael Hutchins at Coogee Bay, Selena's, or I think it was Coogee Bay Hotel, Michael Hutchins and Ice House. Now, people might not know half of those, but yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Gosh, we've covered so much today. We've talked about this idea of play. We talked about what a learning environment in different settings might look like. We talked about safety and the perspectives. We even started talking a little bit about what advocacy might look like in helping to support families. But I do agree, if there was one thing we can take away, get in your spaces, sit down, observe what's occurring, and take note and have a conversation. Thank you so much, Robyn, for our time together. It's been amazing. And
as I say, look forward to talking to you again. And as I say, if anyone needs anything, contact us at Play Australia. You can reach out to me at ceo@playaustralia.org.au, and I'll look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks so much, Robyn.
See you, Robyn. Bye. Thanks for listening to The Bold Blueprint.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach out to us on
elm.net.au or
fireflyhr.com.au.
Bye.
Bye.